So I've been in the visual novel development scene for like about 8 years now, and I end up talking to like new visual novel devs pretty often. I might have even talked to you. And over that time, I've noticed that new visual novel developers tend to fall into one of 5 different types. This isn't just me stereotyping. Well, it is kind of me stereotyping. Just stuff that I've noticed certain patterns over time. And I have suggestions for each of those types of developers that, again, I've met over the years that I think will help them get their first game over the finish line. Type 1. The never played a visual novel developer. Yeah, so this is probably the most common type of first timer. The type of person who wants to make a video game and they're like, oh, like a good first one to start with is a visual novel. They don't seem all that hard. And they instantly jump into it thinking they're just gonna knock it out of the park. However, their biggest misstep is that they start their game dev journey with a lot of assumptions about what visual novels are, but no actual knowledge of the genre or what makes them succeed. This is where you get a lot of, I want to make a visual novel where characters aren't just cardboard cutouts and choices that actually impact the story, but they can't actually name a visual novel that's like that. Now, what types of games do they make? Weirdly enough, I think some of the more interesting visual novels come out from game developers like this. And I want to be clear, even when they're good, they're almost always like just a little hard to play because they generally miss like tons of, quality of life game mechanics that visual novel players have just taken for granted for decades now. But it's also where you can get a lot of wacky off the walls ideas. So if this is you, I have a video on some visual novels you should play. Play some popular visual novels, figure out what works, build your knowledge, and make stuff. The art form as a whole really only grows when we all build off of each other's work. So playing visual novels is an essential first step. Type 2, the visual novel fanfic, even if they don't know they're doing it. So this type of developer is probably the most endearing. They read a story, their mind was just blown, and now they want to recreate that feeling they had when they experienced that narrative and make their own game that does the same thing, or better even. And on one hand, it's awesome they found something they love. And their attempt to make something like it is like a form of self-exploration, a critical analysis to discover what connected them to that media. On the other hand, consuming media and making media are two very different things. And it can set you up for some serious disappointment in just the creative process. I feel a little less bad for devs that decide to go down the mod path for this. Not necessarily because I think modifying existing games is the most fun way for visual novel stuff. Modding visual novels is a very different beast from modifying Skyrim. Very different thing. But it's also they're kind of just playing with toys in a toy box and, putting up their own little scenes. It's cute. The ones I feel truly bad for are the ones that go down the classic fan fiction route of taking characters that they like, they kind of reimagine them for their own narrative, and then they build up this whole new bit of fan fiction from scratch. And it can end up being a huge time investment, even if they never end up finishing the darn thing. What types of games do they make? Honestly, these are probably the more successful types of games from these sorts of beginners, because what they try to do is copy something that's usually already popular, and trying to copy something that's popular is sort of how you make more things that are also popular. The trouble comes if the developer connects with that source material in a way that is vastly different from the majority of people that made it popular in the first place, i.e. Disco Elysium except small town witch mystery. If this is you, honestly, just keep on trucking, but try to keep in mind what the goals are for your game. If you're doing this just for you, just keep on doing your thing. But if you're trying to make a career out of it, or even just a little bit of money on the side, you need to learn how to twist your sensibilities a little bit just so it works with a larger audience. Type 3, making the writer's barely disguised fetish. These horn dogs have been searching far and wide to fulfill their kinks, and once they've reaped the land for all they can consume, they dedicate their lives to receding it themselves. I salute these one-handed warriors, for they are the soldiers of smut, the conquistadors of Rule 34, and our vanguards to new lands of depravity. What types of games do they make? Daz 3D games. Always Daz 3D games. If this is you, Learn to code with one hand. I don't know. Type 4, the indie dev wanderer. It's interesting when experienced game devs come into the visual novel world because they're experienced enough to understand like the game development basics, and they know enough to like research and learn about a genre before they dive in. Where they find themselves lacking is often with the culture of visual novel fans, and it is a weird one. So visual novel fans are like in very different tribes, and even like visual novel developers can feel like a different subsection of all those different sort of things. So in like past videos, I've talked about like the genres of like 18+ games, romance games, horror games, and detective games. But even those genres come in like a whole bunch of different subgenres, and it can be hard to know like what the special sauce of these game genres are unless like you really dove into them. What types of games do they make? Technically impressive train wrecks. So when I think of the types of games that these sorts of developers make, I usually think about that trend of turning like every property into a visual novel that was like all in vogue like 5 years ago. You know, the Dead by Daylight visual novel, the Magic the Gathering visual novel, the KFC visual novel. Like these are all fine and they accomplish their marketing goals, but they fall kind of flat compared to hobbyist projects that I've seen from like really indie devs. Most indie developers like third visual novel is just miles better than a lot of that like weird corpo stuff. And if this is you, try to have fun with it. The Sonic Murder Mystery game by Capcom is like a great example of this because it's a VN done by a team that doesn't do a lot of visual novels, but they put like a lot of heart and soul into it, and that counts for a lot. That's why so many hobbyist projects just have a vitality in them that some professional projects just don't. And it's not something you can replicate with skill alone. So like, you're a professional, go in there and just enjoy it. That's all I can say. And type 5, just the idea person. This is the type of beginner that bothers me the most, and it's like the reason why I'm making this video. Because believe it or not, like idea people are an important part of the game development process. High-level producers will analyze the market, identify a type of game that'll have like a decent rate of return in that style of market, and then they'll collaborate with writers and artists to develop the idea in a pitch deck that they can run past publishers and stuff and get money to actually continue funding development. So in large game studios, the idea person is kind of the money person, but the just that idea person generally skips all that and proclaims, I have a great idea for a game. I need a programmer, a writer, a composer, a project manager, and voice actors. And then when you ask what they'll be contributing to the project, well, they came up with the idea, like their job's done. I haven't met so many of these out in the wild. And if you've personally met me, odds are, like, you're not the person I'm making this video about. If I've met you in person, I probably like you. The idea person is the type of person that just kind of leaves a recruitment post someplace and then never engages with the community at large. I mean, they don't really have any interest in game development or the artistry of games, and they kind of just like to rocket around in the idea nebula. Now, what types of games do they make? Usually they don't. Unlike the other types who are at least like open to learning about the development process, this type tries to like lasso others to congeal like their ethereal concepts into something concrete. And in my experience, at best, it results in nothing. And at worst, like it wastes the time of writers, artists, programmers, voice actors, and even composers. Composers don't just make music for idea people. Don't do that. Don't do that, guys. If this is you, I mean, you already probably stopped watching this video. So for the rest of you, check out my tutorials on how to actually make your game. And if you have advice for other types of visual novel beginners, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I want to hear them.